This is Dune Talk, a DuneNewsNet.com production. Join us now for the latest Dune news, reactions, and lively discussions.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Hope you're having a great week. So we're back here with a new Dune Talk show. So we're going to be continuing our scene-by-scene review of the Dune movie. We're going to be picking up from the 74th minute, so continuing from the point where we left off last week with Lucius Secundus. This is Marcus Gabriel here today with Garen.
Hey everybody, good to be back again. It's Garen.
Hi everyone, Johnny Sobchak back again. Excited to dig into some more of this movie. We've come a good ways, but we still have a ways to go.
This is only the halfway mark, I think, of the movie. Simon here. Excited to talk about it and hopefully get further on. Hey, but all the comments that we're talking about, we love this movie. If we didn't love this movie, it would have been like an episode and a half and been like, that was all right, cool.
Yeah, so before we continue the review, let's dive into some movie news.
Dune Movie News.
So the first story we have for today is we actually got a date for the Blu-ray release of Dune on 4K in the United States. And that's going to be January 11th, 2021. So I know that, Johnny, you learned about this in the past day or so. Like, have you heard anything else so far?
No, I have not heard anything else other than that this January 11th, Tuesday, which is the typical release date for physical home media for movies, is when it's going to be coming out. So that's great. January was always going to be the month just because it lines up with the other Warner Brothers home media releases of the last year or so. And now we have an actual date. This will be the second Tuesday in January. So earlier in the month, which is nice. And it'll be out, of course, Blu-ray, DVD, 4K, Ultra HD. I cannot wait as soon as it's available. It doesn't seem to be listed anywhere yet, but yeah, as soon as it's available, I will be sure to, pre-order it myself. And then I will probably tweet it out and list it, let people know so they can get on it as well. Because not only is it going to be great that you can actually have it at home in the best possible audio quality, best possible visual quality, but also you can contribute more to the film's success because, we've talked about the box office a lot on this show. We've talked about profitability and we've talked about COVID and all these other things, HBO Max. And this is just another, home media, depending on the movie, depending how popular it is and how much people like it and seek it out, can make a big difference.
It is already out in digital in some countries in Europe. So, for example, in Germany, if you go to Amazon.de or like the Apple Store, you can buy it in 4K on digital. So we'll keep you up to date when the dates are announced for the United States. But as Johnny was saying, it's definitely going to be before the home media release. And then in terms of the extras, so I know that we've heard a little bit about like the overseas releases, like it's going to contain things like, for example, some of the featurettes that we've already seen. Any thoughts on what's going to be included in that release?
Yeah, it's tough to say because, a big part of the marketing was doing these kind of behind the scenes and, interview type featurettes where we got to see behind the scenes footage. We got to see interviews with the cast and crew. So it's unclear at this point how much of what has already been released online is what we will see on the Blu-ray. Supposedly, according to some overseas listings, it will have about over an hour of material for the special features. So fingers crossed that we get some fresh stuff to look at. That'll be exciting. Doesn't seem like there's going to be any sort of commentary tracks or anything like that. I don't think Villeneuve has ever done one in the past. We'll see what the future holds, but I wouldn't hold my breath on that. And of course, don't hold your breath for any deleted scenes or anything like that either, or some extended cut, because that doesn't seem to be, at least for now, foreseeable future in the cards at all. And this seems to be the definitive home release for the time being. But yeah, like I said, I would assume, over an hour, I'm trying to think of all the different stuff we've seen so far. Maybe that would add up to about that time, but I think at least something on there will be new. And once we get more details and those listings come out in English and on Amazon or Blu-ray.com or what have you, we'll be able to see the actual listing of some of the featurettes on the back, and we'll be able to figure out if they are totally new or not.
Then the second story I want to cover today is some comments from Denis Villeneuve. So he was in a recent interview with Empire online, and he was on their spoiler podcast. So you do have to have a subscription to access the whole interview. But like they posted quite a lot of highlights on their site, and we've posted it on Dune Newsnet as well with some additional commentary. And one of his comments that stood out was regarding Feyd-Rautha. So, of course, we had the confirmation earlier this year, like, for example, from the interviews with Roger Yuan, the fight coordinator, that, he was being cast as Lieutenant Lanville, and that the plan was that he would return in part 2 to fight Feyd in the arena, which we know is an important scene in the book. Denis had the following comment about that. So he was, of course, talking about that he had intentionally left Feyd for the second part of the movie just because so much stuff was already introduced in the first part, and that whole interview talked a lot about the stuff that he sort of saved for part 2. So the quote was, when he was asked about the presence of Feyd, he said, "Definitely, that's a choice I personally brought on. There was enough characters that were introduced in this first part, and it will be more elegant to keep Feyd for part 2. It will definitely be a very, very important character in the second part." So I'll start with you, Garen. What are your thoughts when the director says that Feyd will have a very, very important part?
So Feyd, for those of you that know the story, Feyd is the counter to Paul. He's similar in age. He's been brought up to be kind of the heir of the Harkonnen house. So to me, it makes a lot of sense that you're going to, whether you wait till the second part or not, that's neither here nor there, because that's not the way it is in the book. But I respect Denis' decision there. But to have it be very important makes sense, because this is going to be an interaction and a threat on kind of a grand scale. And so to me, that again tells me that Denis knows the story. He knows the dynamics of the characters, and there does need to be this climactic interaction between these two people. And I just hope they cast it with someone that has the same sort of gravitas that Timothy Chalamet has, because that confrontation's got to feel really heavy, really intense.
I like that he waited to introduce him into the second movie, because I feel like if he would have brought him into the first movie, it would have been sensory overload. We already have a lot of characters, and I love that the internet thought that Raban and Feyd were going to become one character in this version of Dune. I was like, no, come on. If you've ever read the book or seen any version of Dune, you know that's not possible. But it's building up a new character, and it's kind of like the Emperor again. It's these new characters that we're going to get introduced to that are crucial, and I feel like if they were shown in the first half, it would have been too much. And I have a good feeling early January, when the home release comes out, we're going to start hearing some casting.
You mentioned that before, Simon, and that would make sense to me. I would certainly love to see it. The sooner the better. But it's also interesting because, I never doubted that Feyd would be in these movies. I presume that he wouldn't be in the first one because he was never mentioned or announced as a casting for the first movie. And it does make sense. It's interesting now to finally hear a little bit of insight into why he decided to do that. Of course, first movie, you have to introduce a lot. You literally have to introduce the entire world to these, to the audience. And so I think saving such an important and vital character for the second movie just makes perfect sense. And that includes not just Feyd, but the Emperor and some others. I really can't wait to see who they're going to go with. It's like, it feels so pointless to speculate, and we have done that to death, so I'm not going to go into all that. But I'm glad to hear that, I didn't hear the words come out of his mouth, but to finally see it on paper, and to know that he has been thinking about it in depth and for a long time is certainly promising. And in that article, I don't know if we're going to get into that more, Marcus, but he did talk about some other elements of the universe that he, again, wanted to kind of leave for part 2, or wanted to leave as a mystery for part 1 and explore and establish in more detail in part 2, whether it's characters or different factions or even terms of the universe.
Yeah, and I think we'll get into that at later stages. But yeah, of course, he talked about the emperor and the guild navigators as part of the mysterious elements. We got to see a little bit of the guild, but those were the guild representatives. So yeah, we can look forward to seeing. I think really a lot in the part two. And yeah, I would say about Feyd. If you think about the amount of time he's in the book, it's actually not that much. But I do agree that he is a key character. And the way that they've been approaching this adaptation and adding more depth to characters and expanding on certain roles, like I think it totally makes sense to call him a very, very important character in the book, and like have that parallel with Paul as they both come of age, and then they go up to the conflict at the end. Continuing with our scene-by-scene review of the movie, so we're picking up from the 74th minute, and so basically we've cut away from Seleucus Secundus. We discussed the Sardaukar last week, and now we return to Arrakeen, and we see a very worried Jessica walking down the hallway, and like you can clearly see like the emotion in her body language. So Simon, looking at that scene where Jessica's walking down the hallway, what was your impressions of her in that moment?
Just heartbreaking. I think we originally saw it, I think it was on Colbert. We saw a little preview of it. It's one of the best scenes in the movie. It's also one of the saddest scenes because it is, like I've been saying since we started doing this review, Leto knowing time is ticking and his time is almost over, as we're going to find out soon enough. I love, and I said this when we saw the preview of this scene, when Leto's like, please protect Paul, just not as his mother, but as a Bene Gesserit. And Hans Zimmer's music, we say it every episode, just comes and sneaks up slowly, and you hear that theme. Honestly, go back to a couple episodes, because when we described this scene, I love this scene. It's one of my top 5 scenes.
I really like how this scene helps the viewer distinguish between Jessica's loyalty to the Duke and her loyalty that's inherent to the Bene Gesserit. So obviously it's a very compelling scene between these two characters that we already care about. But I like how it also teaches us that, she really does have a level of deference to the Bene Gesserit, and the audience could say, well, how much? Could she defect? What could her behaviors be if she has, this connection to the Bene Gesserit that goes back even before she was a part of House Atreides? So I just think it was I think Denis did a really good job of making really specific decisions about certain conversations between characters to be exposition to help us understand, the layout and the dynamics going on between the different factions. So it is emotional, like you said, Simon, and it can, and her acting as she's walking down the hall is again just so well done. Her emotion it's not overdone, but it's very intense, and it draws you right in. But I like what you're learning from that previous interaction with Leto.
Yeah, to your point, Garen, I really like, and I've seen this as a complaint from some of the, I guess, book fans, where they, say, oh, well, Lady Jessica, she's so emotional. She's so like, I'm just like, I mean, first off, Lady Jessica she might be Bene Gesserit, but she's still, a human being. And she has great control and poise of her emotions in vital situations, but she doesn't not feel emotion, and she doesn't not show emotion either. Maybe she doesn't show it to other people, but by and large through the movie, she is very well pulled together. I mean, you say in the hall she's coming down, and yeah, it's very intense, but it's not overdone. And 5 seconds later, what does it cut to? She's walking into their bedroom and she looks completely normal. Like you would have no idea she has been upset by anything. So, and actually going into the scene with Leto, she appears to be the stronger, more poised of the two characters. There's not a lot of scenes that we have of Duke, Leto, and Lady Jessica together, but the scenes and the moments that we do have, whether it is, just a little, even back on going back to the Herald of the Change scene, like they just have like these little glances, like that's all you need. Like there's enough there in the subtlety and just the great acting between these two actors that tells you what you need to know about the relationship. And then there's the hand on her neck before they leave Caladan, and holding her hand as they're walking out. Then there's this scene, and then of course there's the scene of them in the bed together that we'll be at in a moment. But I thought this was really the biggest one that kind of brings it all home and just gets what you need out of it before everything hits the fan here shortly.
It's a nice little intimate scene with two characters that can be themselves. And one thing I think people forget is Leto has to put up a front 90% of the time, and so does Jessica. And this is just them being raw and just being themselves, being very intimate and caring about their son.
Yeah, and to the point about Jessica being emotional, I would just like go back to the previous scene. Like she's pregnant, obviously, so that tends to add some emotions. But I think the fact that we do get to see like her in those like more intimate moments alone, like where she does have that freedom to express like that nervousness, emotions, and be less composed. I think that just adds to her character, because that's just so realistic. Like everybody has moments where they're facing difficulties, but like how you come to the day and stand up to those challenges, that's what matters. And like when it comes to those moments, like she's always stand up, and we'll see like later in the movie like how when it comes to those crucial moments, she really is able to take charge and face those challenges head on. So I think that just added to her strength as a character overall.
I also like the contrast that you see between Reverend Mother Mahayam and Jessica, because Mahayam was Jessica's instructor in the Bene Gesserit school. And what I like is we're able to see the sides of Jessica that make her human and relatable. I mean, she's a parent, right? And for anyone that's been a parent, you do have to put on the strong face. You do have to say everything's going to be okay, when deep inside you might be going, I don't know if everything's going to be okay. I don't know how this is going to go, and I'm scared, But so I really like the direction of Jessica's character in this film, because it could have gone really stoic, and the Bene Gesserit are very powerful, and they wield a lot of power. They control a lot of things. They have full control over their physical bodies. So for her to reveal kind of these weaknesses and these fears, it endears me to that character. And I think Jessica becomes a more fleshed out, full spectrum kind of a character. And I like that.
Yeah, and then we had the foreshadowing. So where Duke Leto says, I thought we had more time, and it really signals that, we don't have any more time left, because from that point, like things really come to a head and like start moving very quickly. So we have the scene where Paul's like going to sleep, and Dr. Yui comes into the room and gives him a drink, and that drink also contains some sedatives, because the next time Paul wakes up, he's captured. So we're going to discuss that, and then we have a scene with Jessica and Leto on the bed. So like it's a more intimate scene, but then basically from that, like. Afterwards, Leto gets up from the bed and he's looking outside, and the attack begins. It's like full-blown warfare from that point on. So doing a round table with everyone, like looking at the attack scene as a whole, attack on Arrakeen, what stood out to you? What were your key takeaways, Johnny?
Well, the first thing that just popped in my head as you were describing it is the music in the scene. I mean, just the way it shifts and alters, I mean, all throughout. You get the Harkonnen theme, you get the Atreides theme, you get the Sardaukar theme, you get Duncan's musical cue. I mean, there's just everything. It just is so elegant in the way that it's done. It's really, I think it's one of the most memorable parts of the movie with regards to music. I mean, Hans Zimmer's score is just so prevalent throughout, but this really guides the action, and I can see the images, but I can't escape the music, and I think that's a good thing when the music is this good. Also, the sound, of course. I mean, the effects, the designs of everything, the ships. It's so well thought out and it's so well orchestrated, and I think this was one of the biggest parts of the movie that they really had to get right, and one of the ones that I had been thinking the most about leading up to the actual film's release and the trailers and everything, just to think, well, how are they going to envision this, and how is that going to really play out over time? And the attack from beginning to end, when Leto wakes up, and then maybe when Duncan kind of escapes, it's 15 minutes or something, maybe. I mean, it's not super elongated, but you get all the right beats with all the main characters you need to see, whether it's, of course, Leto waking up and then getting taken down pretty quickly, it's such an ominous. I mean, every time I've seen it in the theater, people are like, they are worried about this guy. And then, of course, I mean, once it happens, it's just a total mess. And it's all downhill from there, essentially. If nothing else, they had to really get across how screwed everyone is. And there's really no escaping this, like no survivors. The beheadings of all the soldiers. I mean, they really are not holding back. And the Baron says that at the end when he's talking to Leto. He's like, your bloodline is done. Like, we are killing your entire family. Your name, your house is going to be a dead house now. It certainly, again, echoes back to, for a lot of people, I'm sure, Game of Thrones. I think this is one of the most Game of Thrones-esque moments of the movie, because we've seen, if you watch that show, which is one of the most popular shows of all time, if not the most, like there is all that plotting that goes into it, and surprise attacks and ambushes, and the discussion of houses, and the discussion of bloodlines, and trying to just wipe people off the face of the earth. So I thought that it just was really well done. It wasn't too flashy necessarily. It wasn't too stilted with regards to the action. I thought the action did exactly what it needed to, and it looked great, sounded great.
It's probably the most Michael Bay part of the movie. It's like Johnny said, it is very much in your face. Every score, everything. It's the blender of every houses. I've never seen Game of Thrones. I've seen the first season. I couldn't get into it. Sorry, internet. If you want to attack me on Twitter, go for it. Just not my cup of tea. But this is big. This is epic. The stuff with Leto, just typical memento mori. You're at the end of your life. You're going to die. And it breaks my heart every time I see it. And the scene that we'll talk about in a little bit with the Baron, that's the most creepiest scene in the movie for me. Even more creepy than the spider. I do love the scene prior with Leto and Jessica when he just tells her, I should have married you. Like, that makes me cry every time. I'm 43 years old. I don't care. I cry. I have a little tear every time I see that part, because I'm like, oh, I love their chemistry together. They're so good. Once again, Joe Walker, give him that Oscar for editing.
I like all the things you guys said. I think those are really good points. The thing that stands out to me is this kind of like what you were saying, Simon, is even the first time I saw this movie, I know exactly what's happening in this scene with Leto going out and looking out the window, so as it were, to see something's wrong. Shields are down. Something's not going right here. Well, I know what's happening. I know who's gonna shoot him. I know everything. But every time he gets shot in the back and his shield stops it for a minute, it's emotional every time for me. It's like he was this powerful leader that I cared about. He cared about his men. He cared about his people. And when he goes down, it's just emotional. And I don't know what Villeneuve's doing there, but somehow it really draws the emotion. I also love sort of the counterpoint of the same way Leto's shield didn't protect him. You see all those Atreides ships sort of out on the landing area, and they get destroyed the same way with those bombs that come down and spin and slow down and go through the shields and then spectacularly explode all these Atreides ships. I just like the contrast. It's not the contrast, it's a mirror of that same process. And I also love how you could have, I think I said this earlier in one of our episodes, but you could have just showed sheer destruction without the human element. But it's like the camera follows Gurney almost close up in some instances, and then all the men following him, and you see his emotion, you see his frantic desperation to do anything to protect his house and his people. And so you can organize and construct these shots to be very emotionless. And I love how Villeneuve weaves the emotion into the characters in these scenes, which are very spectacular scenes. But I'm feeling something for these characters.
So here's my question for you guys that's seen it with someone that's not familiar with the book. Was the reveal of the assassin a surprise to anyone? Like, obviously we know who's going to, like you were saying, Garen, we know when it's going to happen. We know why it happens. But is the reveal of Yui a surprise?
I think it was for people who aren't familiar with it. One criticism I have is we don't care quite as much about Yui as you do when you read the book, because you know him better in the book. But my family, in talking to them afterwards, that came as a shock to them. They didn't necessarily see it coming. Although if you watch closely, there were some very subtle hints. But that was just a few people's response. I don't know, Johnny, did you?
Yeah, no, I certainly I watched, because I've seen the movie with people who don't know anything about Dune, and I've watched I've found myself watching some, because of course it's on HBO Max, so people can do full-blown like YouTube reaction videos to the movie, and yeah, everyone seems pretty surprised by it. Of course, and I think book readers have had issue with the fact that that they essentially ditched the plot behind him being, alluded to as the assassin, or that they ditched the plot with regards to the idea that someone in particular could be betraying them. I haven't had, I didn't really see it as much of an issue. And honestly, that's one of the parts of the book that I feel, I'm not saying it doesn't work in the book, but it's like, it's so, there's the element of his wife is being used to get access to him and to kind of motivate him to go through with this. And like, it has never felt like super, I don't know, compelling necessarily. Like, I get, of course it's your wife, like you're going to do anything to protect your wife, but also like, everyone knows, part of the thing that I've seen in some of the reactions that I've watched and heard of is they're like, once you know about the wife, you're like, dude, your wife is done for. Like, you and your wife, you're never going to see your wife again. You're probably going to be next, right after Leto gets killed. So it's like, that has always been an issue, because it's like, you never really feel like he's going to make it out. Like, you never think Yui is going to be, let out by the Baron to go see his wife after this. So for me, I think it works perfectly fine. I think I would prefer it to be a surprise, just flat out surprise, because I think to try and do it like it is in the book wouldn't translate as well and have the same effect as it does when you're reading it page by page for hundreds of pages. But I thought it was good. And of course, Yui, if nothing else, I think the only thing you really could have done with regards to Yui, if you're going to ditch the traitor plot, if you're going to ditch the allusions to it being, him potentially, I think the one thing that most people would agree on is if maybe you put one other scene in there, maybe just to show him a little bit more. Like, I watched it with my sister and her fiance, again, completely new to Dune. And she and he, they were just like, they were so on edge and like ready to lose it when this is all going down. They're like, no, like when Leto goes down, they're just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And then of course with the whole tooth plot, I think that is something interesting that I think kind of, I love that they kept that basically exactly how it is in the book. Like it's introduced the same way, and it works exactly the same way. And I think it works to pretty good effect as far as kind of keeping the audience engaged and on their toes, because, you know, I think it's interesting and maybe a little bit different from what you're used to, where you have someone who's a traitor. They're just a traitor. Like they decide to go to the other team for whatever reason or motivation. But with this, they've done it, but also they're kind of helping the people they're betraying. Like they're okay, well, help me kill the Baron. Okay, here I'm going to give this pack and put it on the Thopter and give Jessica clues to figure it out. So I like that. I think it was all translated fairly well.
And I think in terms of the adaptation, it did make sense, because there is all that like inner thoughts in the book, and you know, for the movie they went for more showing that and like seeing that in the emotions. So I think it would have been really complicated and would have added a lot of time and potentially interrupted the flow of the movie. But in terms of I think we could have seen a bit more of him, but I think like the little we did get of him, like you sort of do get the impression he's a caring person. So like in terms of people who are new to the story and then like see that reveal, I think it did work out well. Of course, for us who already know the book, you know, I guess we would have wanted to see more. And yeah, I mentioned this in comments as well, but like it just, his story is so tragic, because he basically like betrayed the whole house and like led to their downfall for nothing in the end, because basically like all this, and you know, we see the results of that. It's just like such a tragic story. And like like you would think like if things were differently, like, you know, if he knew what was going to happen, what he would have done. But it just like feels like so senseless in the end for him. Yeah, and another aspect of the scene is we've already been introduced to the different factions and some of the different cultures, and then here we get to see like the unique warfare of the Dune universe. So we've already talked about, you know, like penetrating the shields, and it's a reference later on that, you know, like Baron Harkonnen, like he had to spend like, you know, like an immense fortune to like put this attack to bear. And we also see here like the reason why they didn't follow the Sardaukar, because you see like when you have the Harkonnen soldiers first advancing and fighting against the Atreides, at some point you feel like that they're evenly matched, or that the Atreides, like even though they're caught by surprise, you know, they're able to hold some ground. But then when the Sardaukar come into play, and here we have the decision where they decided to keep like the Sardaukar in their uniform, then you just see like what a difference this fighting force makes there, and you understand like why they're so feared. And then when it comes to the scene with Duncan, and he's fighting at them, you like realize how impressive that is. And that whole scene with Duncan in this escaping, is just like such a cool action sequence, because this movie, like, it doesn't necessarily focus on action, but just that escape, where he's tackling the Sardaukar, and then he fights the Harkonnens, and then after he's beat a few of them, the rest of them just like walk away. It's just really brilliant scene, and we get to escape. And I remember you mentioned that in one of the previous episodes, that's one of the scenes when Duncan is flying in the ornithopter that you get to see a little bit about from the streets, which we didn't get to see much of. So that again, I would have loved to see like some of the actual like civilians who were living in that city, and like what the effect was on them. Like, we don't really get to see that, but yeah, otherwise just really impressive sequence in all aspects. And also in terms of the music, we did get to see like a bit of everything. We even had some of the Bene Gesserit themes as well. Like, even though they weren't present there, we know that they were behind the attack in some way, because they had colluded with Baron Harkonnen, and they're working for the Emperor. So basically, all these events came to play here and brought the downfall of House Atreides. Then things start moving quickly, and we sort of get like a lot of parallel events happening consequently. So we get the scene on the ornithopter where Lady Jessica and Paul come through, and they're tied in bonds. So, Simon, what did you think about that sequence?
It's one of the most creepiest sequence in the book. It makes me think of Clockwork Orange in a lot of ways. I don't know, maybe because the first time I read it, I was a young kid and I thought it was awkward. And I feel like it's not awkward, it's just kind of disgusting and showing who the Harkonnens are. They are very much what Gurney was saying. They're ruthless animals. I love the way it wasn't overlit. It was very much that green, like in the middle of the night type of lighting. I loved it. I thought it was very uncomfortable, and that's why I wanted from this scene. There's a couple of scenes I really wanted to be as I imagined in the book, and this was one of them. That and the tent scene. And I love, I can't express how much I love that Paul tries to use the voice, and she's like, you're not doing it right. And the hand motions, we go back to that, something we saw earlier on. So what we saw there when she was talking to Paul before the ganja bar scene is now important, that we see that they have their own dialogue. You know, when they were doing the press tours, they were talking about how Jessica is a mother to Paul and also a teacher. And you really, really start seeing it from now on until the end of the movie.
Yeah, I love this scene too, because we see this interaction between Atreides and Harkonnen in a way that these are characters, obviously, that we really care about at this point. Jessica and Paul were really concerned about their well-being at this point. You know, we realize the whole house has come down, and the plan is just to kill these two and you know, have their bodies never be found again in the deep desert. I love how accurate this was to the book. So I actually really love the casting choice of the deaf Harkonnen soldier. I just loved his look. I loved the way he spoke. And I don't know if he's actually really deaf or not. It'd be really cool if he is, because I thought that was really well done.
He is.
He is. That's totally cool. I love that. But it felt so accurate to the book, and I just felt like it was so real. And even the fact that, you know, Paul didn't get the pitch right is helping to explain a little bit more detail about, you know, the what's required to make the voice work. That it takes training, it takes skill, which we learned about at the very opening scene of the film. So yeah, I thought this was really well executed. Loved the casting. Actually, we don't really see the pilot of the ornithopter. He's facing forward, but both those Harkonnen soldiers I actually really thought were well cast and really did a great job. And then again, I just loved the sound effect of the voice. And when Jessica screams it really goes right to the core, you know, just very frightening, as a matter of fact. So very, very well done, this scene.
It's exactly what you would want it to be based on what's in the book. It's pretty much spot on. And I love, as you know, I think Simon, you pointed out, the green lighting, I think, is great. They could have done anything for that, you know, interior Thopter light, but they went with green. I think that was just a really interesting choice and very stark. And it's like this kind of, it does have like a kind of like scary quality to it, especially the way it lands on these bald, very pale, you know, Harkonnen soldiers, and the voice. And Rebecca Ferguson as Lady Jessica, you finally get to see, for really the first time in the movie, her be a badass and a killer, and she has no qualms or second thoughts whatsoever. It certainly, you know, I'm a huge Mission Impossible fan, and so her character Ilsa in those movies, I mean, she kicks so much ass. And so in this part, up until this part of the movie, about halfway through, you haven't seen her do any of that because she hasn't needed to. And now she can use the voice perfectly, and she has no hesitation to like just gut these guys right in front of Paul. And there's that great reaction shot where she has the blade and kills this guy, and it cuts back to Paul, and he's like looking at her, and he's just like, he just saw his mom kill someone. He probably never expected that he would ever see that, and now it's happened, and they're in this life or death situation. And yeah, it's just I really do. I loved, and it also some of this is also kind of played. It's kind of played for. It's clever in a kind of humorous way as well, because you have his first attempt to use the voice, and you think, oh, maybe it's going to work, and the guy stands up and he kind of starts walking over, and you're like, oh my god, is it going to work? And then he just slaps him or punches him in the face, or punches him in the gut, or whatever he does. And then he walks back over, and then finally, once Jessica gets it to work and she tells him to kill the guy, he just walks right up to him and just like cuts his throat open, and he just plops right out of the back of the ramp where they were about to ditch Jessica and Paul. So I thought that was great, and I think it just is a really nice segue into them escaping, getting onto the desert, and then seeing the damage and the remnants of Arrakeen afterward.
Also, is it just me, or is it the most lynchy part of the movie? Just like design-wise, take Paul and Jessica out of it, but those two Harkonnen soldiers could have been in like the Lynch version. I don't know. Maybe that's Denis' little homage to the Lynch creepiness.
Yeah, but they don't have red hair that's shaved right down the top in the middle, though.
It was the 80s.
And the last point on that scene is, not only do you see like the Bene Gesserit ability in terms of like Jessica and using the voice and Paul attempting to, but you also understand why they're doing this in the first place, right? Because they reference that, like they can't just outright kill them, because like if they have to face a Bene Gesserit truthsayer, like, she would know the truth immediately. So basically you see like how this ability is so well known and it's feared among them. So they really, they can't just do something and like get away with it. They really have to make sure that they're held accountable, and they'll really be able to say like, I didn't kill them. And then after that we get that scene where basically Paul and Jessica they walked out of the thopter, and then they walk, and it's like a really like atmospheric scene, like in the dusk, and they look back in Arrakeen and they see the fires there. And I just love like the dynamics of the shot, and you sort of like have that like tension. You're like, are we gonna go back there? Like, and like, like how whole house has been destroyed, but then eventually there's the decision, we have to go out into the desert, and their journey really begins. So I love how they did that shot, and we have all these like things happening in parallel. So let's like first start with the scene with the Baron in the room with Leto and Yui. Garen, what was your takeaway from that final scene with Duke Leto?
Yeah, so I there's a lot going on in this scene, and I like how you're actually seeing, the Baron in this, almost like he's loving his food he's eating. It's very creepy. It's very sinister. All his people are standing around like their lives hang in the balance, and he's just eating all this food, almost in a weird sort of sensual way. And then you've got Leto down at the other end, and I like the composition of the shot where he's laying back, he has no clothes on, which just represents, here's this person of power who is now completely humbled to the dirt, right? He has no power anymore, and he's likely going to die. So I love how he looks up, he sees the head of the bull up on the wall. That's obviously the symbol throughout the first part here that talks about ominous, something's going to happen. It's always leading us to know that when we see the bull, or we see the little figurine of the bull and House Atreides, we know it's a portent of not good things to come, right? So I actually really I like this scene, because for the first time you really see how evil the Baron is. I mean, we were given kind of allusions to it, but at this point you just see how just even killing a person, he doesn't even blink an eye. It just life has no meaning in that way to him. But yet he remembers what Yui's agreement with him was. He just, the Baron just tricked him and wasn't, obviously didn't hold up his end of the bargain. Obviously, he's gonna kill whoever he can. So there's a lot going on in this scene. I just like the composition of it, and I love how we get to know the Baron even more. And then as it's carried out, which is pretty accurate to the book as I remember it. And I thought Oscar Isaac just did such a great job with so few words of just feeling so desperate, but then taking action and doing what Yui told him to do. So yeah, there's a lot going on here.
Well, I've been a fan of Oscar Isaac for a very long time. I think probably since I've seen him in Drive, the Ryan Gosling movie. Wow, that movie's 10 years old. And I think this is Oscar Isaac at his best. Granted, he doesn't have that many lines, but just his face, his reaction. He knows it's over. Like you said, we saw the bull again. It's just the Baron also. It's very much, we keep hearing, he's crazy, he's insane. Very much like Vader. Like when I first saw Star Wars, A New Hope, I always thought Vader, okay, not that bad. But the scene when he takes Leia with the droid and the needle used to scare the living crap out of me as a kid. That and E.T. That's for you, Garen. But that is that scene. Like you said, he doesn't care. He's like, whatever, my cousin, I'm going to kill my cousin. I don't care. You're bothering me. I'm in the middle of a good meal. That's what I care more about. And it's just like, you're done. Your family is done. Because in his head, Paul and Jessica are going to magically disappear. They're going to, it's going to be a Sopranos hit where they're going to not be seen ever again. But it's just all of that scene. That is my favorite scene in the movie because it is creepy. It is Dune at its best. It is, two houses technically not fighting anymore because one of them's about to die. But it is performance at its best. And the way it's shot, the way it's lit, it's just gorgeous. And kudos for Oscar Isaac just standing there, butt naked. I don't even want to know how long it took them to shoot that scene. It's just a powerful scene. And once again, low tier, because it's done.
I don't know how I imagined it in the book exactly, but this is pretty damn close. Like it's just this the way Duke Leto, the way he's positioned and the way he's totally nude and the Caravaggio lighting that's going on in this scene. It's and there's a lot of like art and artistic references in this movie, from the costume design to things that are going on with the lighting and framing and whatnot. And that kind of culminates in the scene because even the bull that you have mentioned, that imagery and that symbolism is prevalent throughout the first half of this movie, and then finally comes to a head, no pun intended, in this final scene with Duke Leto. Has anyone been able to hear or read captions or anything, or figure out Duke Leto whispers something before to kind of, I don't know if he's trying to get the Baron to come closer, but it's before the Baron leans over and turns on his shield, and then we hear what he said. We hear him say, "Here I am, here I remain," and then he bites into the capsule. But before that, he says something else. And I saw Duke Leto. I saw Oscar Isaac in an interview months ago, or in the weeks coming up to the premiere and the release. He said something about his final scene and putting something in there for the dialogue that was taken directly from something in the book, something from an inner monologue. And so I've listened to it a few times. I've tried to make it out. And I think what he's saying in the whisper, which I don't know if it's in the captions or not, maybe I'm just making this up, but I think what he's whispering is the final interior monologue from the book, where he says, the flesh shapes the day and the day shapes the flesh, or however that line goes. So if that is what that is, I love that, because of course shows Oscar Isaac. He read the book and he actually really did take that away for that big scene. But yeah, I loved, and also I was curious how they were going to do the actual pill and how it was going to break and the gas was going to come out. And I thought it was very, very effectively done and very effectively like final and total with regards to, I mean, the way everyone in the room just drops, like, and it's not like caught in this wide shot where you can just see the entire room just kind of collapse all at one time. It's kind of like certain bodies are cut off and he breathes it out. And then there's a close up on the Baron as it kind of penetrates the shield to some extent. And then it's through the door behind them and it's kind of pushing out. And you can just see bodies in the background, in the middle ground, the foreground. Piter falls down and is clutching at his throat, and then they just slam the door shut. And the Baron kind of falls over onto the table. So I just thought the way it was done was very, and it's perfectly cross-cut with the ring in the tent where he's reading through the Yui's note and he's going through the bag. And then finally he's pulling out, you're like, what is that? And it's the ring, of course. And that Paul sees it, Jessica sees it. And everyone knows at that point, they know that he is dead. They're not ever going to see him again. And so, then it hits that emotional realization in tandem with his actual death. I thought was just very well done. Again, Joe Walker just absolutely crushes it.
So, Johnny, while you were talking, I looked on. Thank you, HBO Max. Our time is limited now. It is Here I Am, Here I Remain.
Okay, and so
it's so powerful. Also, when you think about it, because
it's not in the book either, is it?
I don't think it is. Yeah. What I love about it, when you go really meta, when you think about it, here I am, Duke Leto. Here I remain. We go to Paul, showing the legacy of the Atreides lives on. Joe Walker, give him that Oscar. Come on.
We as the audience know that Paul is alive. And we also know, even inside the Duke's head as well, he thinks he's going to kill the Baron when he does this. And so he's kind of, maybe he's also kind of saying like, you're going down with me. Like this is going to be it for you as well. You're going to die with my house. And what Duke Leto maybe doesn't, or knows, or maybe doesn't know. I mean, he thinks, for all intents and purposes, that Paul and Jessica are probably not going to make it out of this, presumably. I mean, we know that Yui has tried to help them, and he has suggested that to Duke Leto. But he is kind of, in his head, he's probably like, well, are they even going to survive all this? Like, what are the actual odds that they can get into the desert and get away and survive, the heat and the worms and everything else? So that's a really good point. So, I mean, like, there are a lot of layers and kind of meanings to that final line, and how, between the way it's edited, the way it's delivered, and the way it's written and everything else, I think it's just a really great moment. Again, for audiences who don't know Dune, they see his shield go up, but then they also see it kind of penetrated. So maybe people aren't totally sure. But it's revealed, of course, in a few minutes later, that he does survive, and he has in fact like floated to the top of the room to escape the fumes and to hide in the corner. I was curious because in the book, I don't really remember it being like that. In the book, I don't think it's like that necessarily.
And there are differences there, because in the book you sort of get the impression that he basically gets out of range in time, but here it actually impacts him, and then later on you see that he's recovering in his mud bath. That's some differences. And also the difference here is because, of course, in this adaptation we didn't have that dinner scene that I know that for a lot of people who read the book, including myself, like I would have loved to see that film, because it's a scene that has so much depth in the book. And like there's even like on Audible recording available of Frank Herbert himself reading that scene, and it gives like so much insights about what he intended. There's just like a powerful scene. But going back to that final line from Duke Leto, that line is actually from the dinner scene in the book, because Duke Leto, he receives his guests, and you can see that there's a lot of tensions in the room about the different factions, and people are not happy about how he's changing the customs, and he like does a toast in defiance. Here I am, here I remain, and then he throws the water out of his glass. So we didn't get the dinner scene, but we got to see that same defiance here, because basically he's in his last moment he's gonna he thinks, as you said, he's going to be killing the Baron and taking him done with it.
Johnny, your question was feeling about the adaptation where the Baron ends up on the ceiling and escapes death. If I remember right, and I'm not remembering this scene from the book as clearly as I'd like, but I think Lynch's 1984 film actually does a little better job to reflect what's in the book, because I think what happens is he does kind of mistake Piter for the Baron, if I'm remembering correctly. And they didn't really do that. Denis didn't really do that here, although we see Piter die pretty instantly. But it wasn't as though, I think in the book, Piter leans forward and is speaking. The Baron is there, but then the Baron kind of moves back, and Leto can't really see the medication. Is affecting his reasoning, and so he thinks it's the Baron. So maybe you'll have to correct me on that, Marcus. But I think this adaptation just sort of expands that a little bit, or disconnects it a little bit. But the same effect is happening. It's like it sort of leads to another reveal, like you were saying, Johnny, a few minutes later, of, oh my gosh, this Baron's still alive. Because we don't know, when those doors close, it sort of makes us think everybody in that room died.
Yeah, and then as we were mentioning earlier, we have the editing. All these things are apparently happening in parallel. Like when Paul and Jessica see the ring, and it's the same moment when Leto dies. So really well put together. But then once that passes, we see we stay on the two of them in the still tent, and then there's the mention that there's spice in the still tent, and like something further starts awakening in Paul. And I've mentioned before that this is my favorite scene from the movie. Starting with you, Garen, thinking about this scene, what was your key takeaways about the interaction and the dreams?
My favorite scenes are all the ones with ornithopters in them, but you're asking me a different question. So I really like how we see the full weight of what Paul is realizing is going to happen in the future. So, there's a lot of symbolism in the dreams that he's having. And I love, kind of like Johnny, I love the cinematography where you see this tinkling of the spice in the air and the still tent. I love that so much, because it's telling you that this spice is having an effect on him, and it's affecting his prescient abilities. I think what stands out for me the most is I always love watching the audience jump when Paul sort of uses the voice for a moment there on his mom, because he's so angry, because everybody always jumps. They don't know what's coming. But just the level of fear that you see Paul have, and Timothy did a great job of instilling that, just desperate, where he's kicking the sand to push himself up against the wall of the still tent, almost get away from the truth that he's seeing, that his name will be used to as we know, kill millions of people. And so the audience is sort of realizing, my gosh, this guy is like, he's panicking over something that he's seeing in his dream sequence. And then we see, the symbolism of him, with his troops, and the interaction that happens, and him looking like kind of this emperor-like figure, right? Which we know about. So I just thought it was really well written and really well acted, because you could have created something ultra complicated and ultra confusing in the still tent, but instead it holds to the reaction and the interaction between mom and son, and then it's the fear that almost overcomes Paul, and then Jessica has the courage to reach out and hold Paul again.
This is where we finally get to see Paul. And I hate going back and quoting the Lynch movie in a way, because it is the sleeper has awakened. Paul has finally snapped. He's taken, the white pill or the blue pill, whatever Neo goes on. This is where this is Chalamet at his best. And you're right. The reaction in his face from the beginning of the movie, he looks like a little kid. And finally, we see him grow up and being like, what is going on? Like, I am terrified. Why is this happening to me? And I love that he tells Jessica, what have you done to me? Why did you make me have these visions? And I feel like that's something that's going to be going on for a while. And, if you read the book, there's a love-hate relationship with them. But it's Chalamet and Rebecca Ferguson at their best. And the symbolism of the ring and Paul realizing, okay, this is going to happen. And I have to tell myself I can stop it or I can embrace it. And that's Paul's journey, really. And it's just beautiful and kind of sad and scary. And I don't think people are ready for what Paul will do in the name of House Atreides in a couple years. Chalamet fanboys and fangirls, you might want to look for a new hero.
This is so, this is probably, honestly, this is going to be the scene where I think people in a couple, 2-3 years, and then, presumably there'll be a third movie, fingers crossed. But I think this is going to be the scene, like, for years, people are going to come back to the scene and watch it and be like, they're going to pull it apart. They're going to be like, oh my God, this is what this is. This is what that meant all along. This is where this was going. And I just absolutely love this scene. I think you certainly have a different appreciation for it if you're a fan of the book, especially if you've read past the first book, if you've read Dune Messiah, for example. It just is so good. And this is the scene that does really, maybe more than anything else in the movie. I think the movie does a fantastic job of showing that Paul and the Atreides in general are not heroic figures necessarily. There are hints and things sprinkled throughout, and just little details that are uncomfortable and make you feel like this isn't quite right. But this scene is like, if you missed all the other stuff, I'm just going to bash you over the head with the fact that bad stuff is going to happen, and bad stuff is going to happen because of Paul. Paul is going to make these decisions. He's going to lead these bad things. And I think that's what, more than anything else, if people are like, well, why is it, this seems like a white savior narrative. This seems like, that this is just, Paul, mighty whitey, Paul Atreides going out into the desert and saving the Fremen and all these other things. Like, oh, it's really not. It's going a completely different direction than what you expect. And I think this just shows, like, he says the dialogue is so damn good, and it's basically, the way it's written is straight out of the book. Like, it is the tent scene essentially to a T, visions included. You have the Fremen, you have the Feyd-Rautha warriors bowing and kneeling, and it looks amazing. And the weirding way in action, like, we get the smallest little glimpse of it later on in the movie which we'll talk about later, but when they run into the Fremen in the desert, and Lady Jessica has to take down Stilgar, and you see her like do this like crazy flip and like walk up a rock and like spin around and get behind him. And we know where that's kind of leading to, and we get a vision of that here. And it's just like, they're popping out of the sand and they are like flying through the air and like doing these crazy acrobatics and taking on like 2, 3, 4 Sardaukar at a time, like no problem. These are not even the Fremen that we know in this movie, that we see fight in this movie. These are going to be like unstoppable, killing machines. And That's one thing I think, even thinking about part two, and I won't go into like spoilers necessarily, but people, and I'm curious how they're going to depict it, because they could change it. I mean, this is just how it is based on the book. But like the Feyd-Rautha are so they outmatch the Sardaukar so significantly, and there are so many of them in the millions, as we kind of know based on the numbers that Duncan brings earlier in this movie. But like the any sort of big battle with these guys is not going to last very long. Like it's not really even going to be a battle necessarily. It's just going to be like a slaughter. And that's really the point. It's not about the fact that these people are going to go and fight anyone. They're going to just demolish them. And that's really what happens. As we know, Paul says, the Atreides banner waving, and then, killing in my name, and this unquenchable fire. And literally, I mean, we see, I'm glad they kept this in the movie. I wasn't sure if it was just something that was going to be in the trailer and then it would have to end up getting cut for the movie. But I mean, we see piles of bodies burning across seemingly different planets and things like that, and bloody Feyd-Rautha warriors and crysknives. And this is no joke. And there is the mention of Duke Leto's skull, and people worshiping at his skull. And that's a very specific thing that happens and comes on later. Not even necessarily in this first book, but it just, oh man, I'm so glad Villeneuve is like a legit fan of the books and has read all of it. Because, if you just got someone to make this movie who hasn't read the book even, or maybe not read past the first book, like, I don't know how this scene would be depicted necessarily. It would not have any of the depth or the symbolism. It's everything in one scene that is to come. And it just makes me so giddy. When I was watching this the first time and it played out the way it did, I was just so glad to see that they didn't shy away from this messaging or from this imagery that we get in the scene, because it is so critical. As Simon rightly pointed out, this is the point of no return. This is like, he is awakening. He is, the brakes are not getting applied on this thing. Like at this point, like it's going forth, and it's just time to see what all is going to happen.
Remember last week when I mentioned the Sardaukars are not the best warriors in the galaxy?
I think that scene with Paul and Chani, up in the ship and all the Feyd-Rautha soldiers down below and everything. I really think that sequence, or that shot, is for all of us who've read the book, because I really think 95% of people who saw Dune and didn't read the book, they haven't grasped what's ahead yet. And I think Villeneuve was really wise to not bowl everybody over with the future of Paul Atreides and what his rulership is going to be like, because I think it would have really confused people, because you're at this moment, like you guys have already said, where Paul is awakening to who he really is and what his role is going to be. And I think if Villeneuve had overwhelmed us with the future of Paul Atreides, which isn't what people think it is, at least those who haven't read the book, I think that could have been really overwhelming. So the fact that shot where you see both Paul and Chani looking down on all those soldiers down there, and you see their blue eyes, you see the look on their faces, which is very overlord-like. I knew exactly what Villeneuve was doing there. I knew exactly where this was going, and it made me go, okay, again, he knows this story, thank goodness. But none of my family had any clue what was happening there or what that truly means. So I just think that was played really subtly, but also very wisely.
From my point of view, as a book reader, albeit, I think it does a good job of putting in those little hints and getting that messaging across. And this is the key scene for that. But for part two, I mean, I'm super curious to see like what the script is going to be like for this and how they're going to position these characters, the journey they're going to have to go through over the course of 2.5, 3 hours for the movie. And then, spoiler alert, like years in the movie, like there's going to have to be significant changes, and there's going to have to be significant, bad things happening. Like
I want to be that kid that ruins Christmas and tell everyone what happens. And also, I don't want to be that kid and be like, it's like, do you tell them or do you let them be like, what the?
Yeah, and we just gone over like how important this scene is and how much different things are happening in the scene. But like it's good to take a moment, step back and realize that this is all happening inside a tent with two people, and like all these like like universe changing events are just happening like in this intimate moment. And I just thought that was just so powerfully edited together in the scene. And it was close to how I imagined in the book, but like also the way that the visuals are, because they literally are in a sand dune, like under the ground when this is happening. So basically, Paul is literally in Dune and awakening. So it's just like symbolically so powerful there. And just the dreams. Like we got to see the knife again. So this is the second time we see that Chris knife on the ground in a sheath. And it's going to be, we're going to see it a couple more times, so that's significant. The range of emotions, like of Paul and how Timothée Chalamet portrayed it, like that moment where he's like basically like, somebody help me, please. You just feel that desperation in him. But then like later on in the morning, like he's fully recovered, and you see from that point he's in control and like going to face it. Yeah, just like a powerful transformation overall.
I was just going to say, I know we're way over, but I just want to point something out. There is a really important dialogue interaction between Paul and Jessica in the still tent that Villeneuve completely left out of the script. And if you guys know what I'm talking about, this is going to be the ultimate reveal in part 2. And I'm just going to say it. This is a spoiler alert, but this is where George Lucas completely lifted out a part of Dune and put it right into Star Wars, right? Because this is the shocking moment where you realize the familial relationships between the houses. Even though we've already heard the Baron when he's eating sensually at his table, he says, "Wonderful kitchen, cousin." He's talking to Leto at the other end of the table. But Denis left it out. He didn't include that part. And maybe he was trying to simplify the still tent to make sure we're not completely overwhelmed. But
I like that he left out that part, because I feel like very much like Faye, like when we started the show, it is a big reveal, and keep it for a second part. Make people go, whoa, a couple times. You want those whoa moments. And what I was going to say is there's two people I want to be when I grow up. I want to be Dave Grohl and Joe Walker.
I'm too, Garen. I honestly, so this is a big part of the book that I always forget about. I don't know.
Crucial.
I don't know if I can't be the only one, but I feel like I am probably one of the few that I always forget about this. But it is true that does happen in the tent scene, and I agree. I'm glad they left it out, because it could get lost in all of the other intense things that are happening and revelations in that scene.
And that's not the only reveal of this type that they didn't tackle in this movie. And we'll touch on that next week, because I think that will fit good into our discussion there. But yeah, I mean, Denis Villeneuve has said it himself. He's intentionally kept a lot of elements to part 2, like retained that sense of mystery. And I think that's going to, especially for both people who haven't read the books, like, because we're excited to see how exactly this is going to play out. Yeah, so that's all for this week's part of the review. Make sure to join us next week for the final part of this movie review series. So looking forward to discussing the ending and some of the reveals there.
Yes, everyone, thank you for tuning in yet again. Please do. I know Simon mentioned it earlier in the show, but leave comments, leave your thoughts. Definitely gonna hit the comment section as best I can and see what people are thinking. But I'm really enjoying digging into this. I'm remembering things. I haven't seen the movie in a couple of weeks now, so I'm like picking up on different details and love discussing this. I'm gonna be sad when we're done talking about it. Fingers crossed, though. Probably everyone's ready for us to be done with this next week, and I look forward to that. So see you then.
This is Garen. Really appreciated all the comments today from the guys. I'd really love to know kind of what our listeners out there think about some of our ideas, because we have our perspective, but you all have your perspective, and it'd be really cool to hear what you have to say. And you can find me on Twitter at Dune Companion.
So I think your Thanksgiving, what you guys are going to be thankful for is that we're going to be done soon with the commentary. But honestly, thank you for everyone that's been watching them. I know we got some fun stuff planned, and we're almost there, people.
And this is Marcus Gabriel. You can find me at DuneNewsNet.com and DuneNewsNet on social media. So talk to you all next week.
We hope you've enjoyed Dune Talk. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you know when the next episode drops. Stay tuned to DuneNewsNet.com and add us to your social feeds. Be the first to hear breaking news and reviews.